So you deliver massive value and comprehensive financial planning to clients? Yeah, get in line. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Perfect RIA podcast. I am your host, Matthew Jarvis, and with me today is not Micah Shalansky, but instead Reese Harper, who you may know from Kitsis.com, episode 184. You may know him from Dentist Advisors. You may know him from Elements Financial Planning Software. Reese, really an honor to have you here on the podcast today.
Matthew, good to be with you, man. Excited. Just released the episode me and you recorded at XYPN recently, and people, of course, downloaded it like crazy and loved it. So excited to chat, man.
Yeah, it's that was a lot of fun. We did that there in the lobby of XYPN Live, which is always a fun event. So that was a lot of fun. Reese, excited to have you today because you've got a double angle on the advisory world, right? And Mike and I always talk about do what works, right? We want to model success. And so you've got your own RIA, Dentist Advisors, which is a wildly successful practice, very tight niche, which we can talk about. And then, of course, you've got your financial planning software, which I think is a little too vague of a term for what you're doing, but you're seeing this from both as an advisor in the trenches and then as somebody who's serving advisors. Tell us a little bit about that, about your backstory, about what you're working on.
Well, I started, I've got an RIA that I've been the founder of for a long time. Great team over there. And we're, bringing on hundreds of clients a year right now. And it's growing nicely, not like 100% year over year growth, but like 35, 40% like top line growth and kind of sustainable, profitable growth.
Nice.
Right. Which I like. I'm not probably smart enough to do 100% year over year growth and still figure out how to go skiing. So try to find a little bit of balance there, but our teams, figured out how to serve dentists and build a really nice niche RIA around that. And I think, a lot of the topics you talk about in your show are what do you do different that nobody else does, and for me, like the easiest way to answer that was just straight up pick an occupation and like dominate that occupation. Now that's challenging, and I don't know that it's not the only way to build a business, but that's why people come to us, right? Dentists come to us because we're probably the loudest and most right now, at least until some young guy or gal starts to outmarket us and outcompete us, we're probably the most well-known dental specific fiduciary that's in wealth management, and that helps especially for the younger generation. So that's my background there, and just really enjoyed building it. It's been a blast. And then with what I learned inside of that experience, I was getting to the point where I was like, man, we're missing a new type of tech in wealth management. We're missing something that lives like in between financial planning software and in between CRM and the cell phone. Like, how can I communicate with my client and deliver like consistent value and touches, and we call them micro interactions, to my client through mobile tech? I mean, that was just a big gap for us in our RIA, and email and PDFs and having people log into your planning software, like all of that stuff's okay, but like people are on their phones, and if we can't engage them there, it's going to be really difficult to scale across more clients as fees continue to kind of get pressure, and we have to deliver more value. Like you've got to find a way to get more revenue. You've got to find a way to decrease costs, and you got to get more efficient. I mean, those are the three ways that, that's what Elements is trying to do. Find a way to help advisors increase revenue, bring down their cost of support, and then be more efficient with their client interactions. So.
I think it's a pretty interesting observation you mentioned about email and PDF, right? I mean, if you and I surveyed 100 or 1,000 advisors and asked, all right, how are you communicating with clients? They'd say, well, I log into insert name of big financial planning program here. I PDF a giant report and I email it to my clients. And you and I, Reese, we look at that and say, well, that's what every other advisor is doing, right? If you're going to a prospect, whether you have a niche or not, and saying, guess what I'll do? I'll generate a 100-page report that any other advisor will do, or you could buy the software yourself and just generate it and save a lot of money. uh, that's not value. So I love how you looked and said, "Great, our group, especially our younger group, they're mobile centric. How could we be mobile centric? And then how do we get past just let's review your statement together?"
Yeah, and I mean that's where I think it's really good news for the advisor. I mean, I honestly, if I felt like going direct to consumer with financial planning would have been a smarter play, like I would have already done it. I mean, I had a big consumer audience in
Yeah,
dentists that weren't um my customers as advisory customers. Like there's, of the 200,000 dentists in the country, a big chunk of them are going to be self-directed,
yeah,
like
yeah.
DIY customers. And so I saw really quickly that like it, it was really hard to get someone to be accountable and stay motivated to like actually do the steps to get their financial life organized and take next actions. And but if you insert a human in there, like it's a it's like a really really important power up in a lot of cases to get people to sort of like pay attention and care. You see that in a lot of industries, whether it's nutrition or personal training or medicine. You take the professional out of the picture and the industry kind of just isn't, it dies. Like there's more value in the industry when there's a human involved, and especially in financial planning. So
Mm,
what we found was that, you know, a lot of times the communication that's required isn't as sophisticated as you would think.
yeah.
It's just like very simple stuff, but it needs to be from the advisor. It needs to be personalized. It has to be thoughtful. So, for example, it could be as simple as um, a push notification or a message out to the client that says, "Hey, I just noticed your youngest turned 2 years old. Right? Hey, I don't want to like intrude, and I don't want to like get too personal. If this is uncomfortable to ask, but what's your like family plan like going forward? Like, do you guys think you're gonna like? Is this like two kids seem like it's we good, or you thinking like three? Just do you mind sharing a little bit more with me about any plans for the future of your family?" And it's like that simple, and it's
Mm,
like it's bridging the gap between like data and an emotional kind of connection that you can make with a client. And they care a lot about these like emotional, like support related jobs. They care less about the functional stuff, like the Roth IRA
right.
conversion's
Yeah,
meaningful,
yeah.
but they really actually want to know that you care. And if you I did this big project after reading a book like 5 years ago by Anthony Ulwick. It was called Jobs to Be Done. He has a
Hmm,
consulting company in Silicon Valley called Strategen, and it's basically like him, Anthony, Tony Ulwick, and Clayton Christensen, a Harvard Business School professor, worked together to come up with this like theory about what jobs consumers are trying to get done from their products that they buy or their
sure.
service providers. And there were three categories of jobs: functional jobs, emotional jobs, and social jobs.
Interesting.
And if you look at that in financial planning, a social job would be like, I want to look good to my friends, right? I want to look good and not look like I'm out of control with my money. Or I want to look like I've got all my crap together, right? That's a social job. You're like cueing to people around you, that you've got your financial house in order. There's
Okay.
a ton of social jobs like that. There's emotional jobs which are like, I want to feel like I'm headed in the right direction. I want to feel confident that I'm like moving towards the right end game. I want to feel like I've got a smart person in my pocket. I
Yeah.
want, that I can just reach out and call. And then you've got these functional jobs like, I've got to open an account for my kids 529. I
Hmm,
want to convert my Roth IRA. I want to be able to put money into a retirement plan. And the functional jobs are what they expect from their advisor a lot, right?
yep.
So of course you're going to be like managing my account and doing my investing, and you're going to be like talking to me about all these expected things that I've heard as part of your job. But what they don't expect are when you connect the emotional kind of side of financial planning and you kind of cross that boundary just a little bit in a way that feels really human and really valuable. Could be asking a question about values, could be determining someone's life plan in a little bit more depth, right?
Hmm.
clarifying a question about, hey, tell me a little bit about why you bought that property. Tell me what, like, what does that property mean to you, if anything? Or is it just a, is it a residence you're going to kind of like turn over and dump? Or like, tell me about like when you bought it and the story behind why you bought it and what that location meant to you, like why that city. You're getting past the value of the asset itself and you're getting into the why, the emotional kind of side of each thing on their balance sheet.
Yeah.
And I found that that's kind of the difference between like really engaged
Mm,
clients and clients who are just struggling to engage. If you're always reaching out with functional stuff all the time, like, can you send me this? Can you give me that? Can you update this? Your account's not linked. Can you link it?
mhm,
Um, it just kind of burns them out after a while because it's not that interesting.
mhm.
They want to story tell and they want to hear stories and they want to like feel connection to their advisor more than they want to get functional jobs done. So anyway, I just want to share
Yeah.
that and see what your reaction to that might be.
Yeah, well, I think there's several things to kind of spin out of that, right? One, I love this idea that the best advisors know that the stories to ask, right? Because that's ultimately why people hire us, right, Reese? If they were just looking for data, Google already has all of the data, right? There is no data that Google does not have. To your
Hmm.
example, how much should I convert to a Roth? Google can tell you the answer to that. What Google can't tell you is how much Roth conversion will help me create whatever, accomplish my goal for my kids. We're thinking about having our third kid, right? What impacts does that have? And I think that's again where we need to focus as advisors. That's where we can deliver value. Also on technology, my thought came to mind. Sometimes we rely too much on the technology in a sense that we expect the technology to do all the lifting. To your point, though, it's only that functional piece. I love what you've done with elements, and tell me if I'm positioning this wrong, where advisors can use the technology to support them going deeper. So instead of me spending the time saying, hey, what's your debt to income ratio, or what are these different things, the software can tell me that, and then I can help the client understand the story behind that. That again is where my value comes in as an advisor. It's not, here's another report from Orion or from Morningstar or whomever.
Yeah, and we think it's really important to customize all of that communication, rather than having it be system generated.
Mhm.
The product we're building is a really big product in terms of its breadth. It's very expensive to build and it takes a lot of time. This is the first year we started last year, with our web development, and we started a little bit before that with mobile development to test a prototype, because we wanted to really kind of understand. We were architecting the system in a unique way, which is called native mobile development,
Hmm.
where both the Android and the iPhone applications are custom built for the platforms themselves.
Wow.
They're not like a web product that's kind of
Mhm.
crammed down into the mobile device. And the reason like a lot of you would choose to do that is because it's snappier and kind of more
Mm.
responsive, and it feels like it's a real piece of software on the device, which is it's a lot more expensive. But it
Yeah.
also, if your goal is engagement from the end user, you have to be really careful about latency, about refresh times,
Yeah.
about what it feels like to them. Does it feel
Sure.
like it? If they're like an Android user and they love Android and they download an app and it feels like it was built for the web, or it feels like it was built for iPhone, they notice,
Mhm.
especially millennials, and Gen Z, especially. I mean, it's a different market now. So we built it on mobile, and we started by saying, okay, there's like three main components that we are going to have to like address. Financial planning software is a beast. Like
Mhm.
I mean, eMoney's 20 plus years old,
Mhm.
right? It's had tens, if not $100 million plus in
Oh, yeah.
development that's
Yeah.
gone into it, right? And so it's also too complex, and it's got a lot of features, and it's been overbuilt in a lot
Mhm.
of ways, and it doesn't do like the bare minimum you want it to do sometimes, which is like just get me accurate data on my client. Like I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
want to know, like, I want to know if that net worth is trustworthy. I want to know if that house is trustworthy. I want to know if I'm missing any assets or debts. And so what we tried to do, Elements was an attempt to simplify a really complex set of forecasts
Mm.
and cash flow models into just a dashboard of KPIs.
Sure.
So, like, that's one component of the software, is making planning simpler, like turning a real complex future looking state into just a set of KPIs that kind of, when
Mm.
you look at that scorecard, you're like, I know exactly what I need to tell my client. Like I don't have any questions because the scorecard hits retirement, it hits cash flow, it hits their asset mix, it's hitting their investment mix, their insurance mix, their estate status, that kind of stuff. And so the second thing we knew it needed to do is we have to find a way to be able to communicate with the client through the tech.
Yeah.
Like we got to be able to like push through mobile to them something because they're texting a lot, but it's tough to archive all that. We can't consolidate all that communication very easily, and when it's in 50 different channels. And so we thought, okay, look, let's focus on mobile communication. So it's a communication and it's planning. And then this third component that we knew it needed to be was like it's kind of got to be a project management system. It's got to tell you what
Mhm.
next thing to do, right? What you're missing, where the gaps are at, what's wrong, what's something that the data can identify. And that's where these like value adds come in for us is like we haven't accomplished this yet, and we're going to have our first version of prompts. We've been testing them this quarter for the first time with a small cohort of customers where we send the customer an email with copy in it and allows them to customize it if they want or just push send.
Hmm.
So it's like we have all the data, we craft the communication and see we didn't tell the advisor to send it. We just said here's 10 insights
Mhm.
that you could push send on if you want and send them to your client. And what was interesting for me, I wasn't sure it's going to work because I thought advisors are going to like spin their wheels and like redo the copy and like change everything. And I found most of them were just like push and send on almost
Yeah.
everything, just going like bing 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 bing. I was like, okay, this is interesting. Like if the data is good and the copy is rational, they're just pushing send. And if we do this inside of a mobile device instead of doing it inside of email,
Mhm.
the likelihood of the client actually paying attention to it and noticing it could be higher. You could do it in both places, but that was kind of that's the area we're exploring right now, and is like how do we surface the next action to the advisor? It could be the dumbest simplest thing, like I said earlier, that one insight about family, or hey, it looks like you still haven't put a life insurance policy in the system. I want to have a chat about that. It
Yeah.
could be like, oh, this document is 12 months old and that meets my aging standard for when I want to replace that document.
Sure.
Can you kick it over to me a new one? But we're trying to make it to where the advisor can just push out a ton of communications across their whole clientele with really smart cues rather than one by one having to look at the whole case and think of the whole case. Like it shouldn't be our system telling them what to say, but we should suggest what to say. Let them decide if they want to customize that or if it's just simple enough to let it go. And then just allow advisors to communicate more frequently about smaller stuff that's lets their client feel the pulse. Now, I don't know that this is as applicable to clientele of 15 or 20. You've got a pretty unique practice yourself, Matthew, where you've got pretty high net worth clientele, pretty high income, pretty high revenue. Maybe the frequency of touches you're going to want to like make be less frequent and kind of like back off on that. Or maybe you'd love to have more touches that are just lightweight, that aren't so heavy for you to deliver.
Well, let me tell you.
I'm still trying to understand where this applies in the market most, because I know it applies in like this world where people don't have millions and millions to manage, but they've got 500, they've got 750, they got 250, they got nothing but a high income. They're a Henry. It's a great fit in that market. And I'm gonna kind of some advisors just don't want to communicate at all because they're like, dude, if like my client doesn't say anything's wrong, like I don't want to start anything. So I'm
Yeah.
curious what your thoughts are about all that.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things come to mind, right? Historically, the retention rate in the industry, in fact, Kits has just published this again, was like 90 to 95%. Like you could really do nothing for decades and you'd still keep your clients. I think, and Reese, I'd be curious to that. I think that's shifting, right? Clients are expecting more and more. So advisors who are telling themselves, hey, I don't communicate with my clients ever and it's not a big deal. That ship is sailing. That will not always be the case. That's where you're going to see guys like Reese and I taking all your clients. The other thing, I was just throwing it out there. The other thing that comes to mind, Reese, is how easy you made it for the advisor. An example of that for our practice, we had for years talked to clients that, hey, make sure you pull your credit report once a year and look at that kind of stuff. And nobody did it, right? Nobody did it. And then last year, Alex did this one pager showing clients step by step how to do it, and then telling them, hey, if you'd like, we'd be glad to just log in with you and do it. And we had dozens of clients respond. They said, yeah, I did it. Or, hey, could you log in with me really quick? But I like this idea of how can we make this as easy as possible? So instead of telling your clients, hey, have a meaningful discussion with your kids about what happens when you die, give them this document that says, if I
Yeah,
die,
yeah,
call Reese and then do
yeah.
this and then do this. Like, how can you make it as easy as possible versus
Yeah,
having
dude,
them? Yeah.
we tested like two things there that I want to
Yeah,
respond to.
please.
One, I think that on your first comment, what's happening is retention rates are probably going to stay high.
Okay.
What's not going to happen is the percentage of the market that's willing to work with an advisor, the people you never see because they're never
Mm,
going to come talk to you,
yeah.
that's going way up right now.
Yeah.
Like I've done a lot of consumer research anecdotally and with my own testing and blogging, and I know that in that 10 years ago when I started, people that I would talk to in their late 30s, mid 30s, like the volume of people that are willing to work with an advisor then was
Yeah.
much higher than today. Like they've got Wealthfront, they've got
Yeah.
Betterment. Now I guess they've got UBS because I think UBS just bought Wealthfront for like 1.5 billion last week.
Really? Wow.
Someone bought them. I think it was UBS. Anyway, there's a lot of direct robo platforms and people are getting used to them.
Yeah.
Greenlight's freaking awesome. You guys seen Greenlight? Like
Uh-uh.
it's like a kid's savings credit card and debit card.
Oh, actually, my kid
Um,
was telling me about that. He wanted
dude, it's
one. Yeah.
freaking they're like taking off. They're like a multi-billion dollar company in like 6 months, you know.
Huh.
Anyway, it's like there's a lot of digital first solutions, and you're just not gonna switch people away from those either. It's hard.
Yeah.
The people that come to you and say this, I, I know everyone has examples of people switching over to you from Robo,
Yeah.
but that's because that customer was not a Robo
Mhm.
customer type anyway. They were someone who was probably most likely going to be an advisory client once they got enough assets, once they had enough complexity. But there's this middle road of tens of millions of households I just don't think are going to as likely to come to an advisor
Mm.
unless you're saying, yeah, you can do this on your own, but like here are 17 jobs I do during the year, right? This is how I talk to my clients
Oh,
if I'm
nice.
trying to sell them on my value.
Yeah.
I'll be like, well, one of the things I do is I monitor the change in your net worth on a quarterly basis so that I can identify if we're trending in the right direction. That's like one job I'll describe to them. I'll be like, here's how I do that job, and here's the point of it, and here's why monitoring that's important, and then talk to them about my estate planning job, talk to them about my insurance job, talk to them about how I look at debt, talk to them how I look at, I just list the
Interesting. Yeah.
jobs, I disclose the jobs and kind of make them more tangible to the client so that they know, like, oh, because comprehensive planning, I'm sorry, it's not a job the client wants to get done. They'll never say, like,
Mhm.
I've been looking for a comprehensive plan. It's like, no, they don't want to do
No.
that. They, in their brains, they have little jobs they're trying to get done.
Mhm.
And some of them are emotional, some are social, and some are functional. And so if you list the functional jobs out that you do, like, one thing that I do every year is I make sure that I have a savings plan for the entire year mapped out, which account it's going to go to, what percentage of our income we're going to put away, and we make sure that we hold ourselves to that savings plan so at the end of the year your savings rate is high, or high enough for your income level. And then I
Sure.
compare that to your peers and I give you some feedback on whether I think you're saving enough money for your income level. Now that's a tangible job in their
Mhm.
mind, and they're going like, I don't do that on my own. Like I'm not going to do that one.
Yeah.
And so if you can frame these in terms of jobs that you're going to do, then the customer is likely to say, well, Wealthfront doesn't do that.
Mhm.
Okay. But if you're like, well, I do index funds and I do portfolio management or I do comprehensive planning, well, Wealthfront's website says comprehensive planning too. It's
Yeah.
got a tab there that says that,
Yeah.
and it's free. Vanguard does that.
Yep.
So like my point was, look, I to your first kind of aside, I don't think that retention rates are going to like go down a lot because once someone makes a choice to work with someone,
Yeah.
it's hard to leave.
Yep.
They just like you, and there's a lot of social kind of reasons that they worked with you, and it's a complex decision. But I don't, so if you got a clientele and you're full and it's good, then I think it's more about efficiency
Yeah.
because, but you've got to either generate more revenue today, you've got to bring down your cost, you got to be more efficient, one of those three. And anyway, we kind of went on an aside on the
No, it's
first
fine.
point. And what was the second thing you talked about? You besides advisors leaving clients, you kind of went on to something
It
that I
was
was.
about making the clients make it as easy as possible for the client to implement, right? So if
Oh,
you say like, "Hey, go
dude.
get estate documents,"
Yeah.
like, I don't
Yeah.
even know why I'm getting estate.
Yeah.
I don't wanna call attorneys. I don't wanna figure this thing out.
Well, and for me, I found that same thing with the advisor. Like
Yes, yes.
if I queued up like something that was like, have a conversation with your client about the change in their net worth. They're just like, I
Where
can't
do I
do that.
start? Yeah, what do I
But
start?
if I sent them a message that said Tom's net worth went up $62,000 in the last 3 months, one of his assets makes up 70% of his net worth, and it's
Mm,
a manual entry. He hasn't updated it in 8 months. Ask him what the value of this asset is. Here's the copy, push
mhm.
send. Then they're just like, boom,
Yeah, yeah,
and I'm like, okay, I can't just tell them generally what to do. I got to be like real specific. And the minute we started doing that, it was like, all right, it's working. And it's hard because as an advisor, I felt that pain in my practice as
totally.
well. And I guess it was natural for us to kind of figure out the solution to that. But I don't want to have to think about what to do. I just want to be told what to do, and I'll do it and make a little bit of customization. But if you tell me like go execute this big plan, it's really hard for me to do that. So we're not trying to like ensure comprehensive planning happens all up front, or like we're not trying to be too dogmatic here. What we're trying to do is get activity to happen
Mhm.
between the client and the advisor all the time.
Yeah.
And so if somebody doesn't log into their app and it's been like 4 days, I'm going to prompt the advisor with a custom message that lets him ping the client and say, hey, we still haven't been able to finish building your net worth. Net worth is really important to me for these reasons. Can you add an asset by clicking this button, and just give the client the freaking button?
Yeah,
Give them
yeah,
the
right there,
button.
the link in the email. Yep,
Yep. And in our case, the prompt I was just describing. That's a text message with an actual button in app
that's
that they're just going
awesome.
to go like push,
Yep.
add the asset. Like, you know, anyway, that's the type of work that we're like experimenting with, is communication, next actions, and then a simplified planning system so that we're not doing this big heavy lift every
Mhm.
time
Yep.
to get started, because no one really cares about that. That's an advisor tool. Like these forecasts, these Monte Carlo simulations, these are advisor tools. They're
Mhm.
not client
Mm-mm.
facing tools. They just weren't designed for that to be used that way in the beginning. So
Something we touched on lightly at the beginning of this episode, and you just mentioned again, is kind of this that the technology needs to make you more efficient, right? I was talking to a group of advisors recently,
yeah.
and we did this informal poll, and they were saying that it was taking them up to 90 minutes to prepare for a client review meeting. 90 minutes, that's
Yeah.
longer than the meeting itself. And I'm more in like the 10 to 15, probably less range. But what we realized is they were spending all this time to manually think, all right, do I need to talk to them about estate plan? To manually think, is their net worth up to date? To manually think, are they logging in? And it sounds like that's a real power of Elements to say, great, here are these cues. If you're getting ready to walk into the client meeting, here's 17 cues, these 17 jobs you spoke of, Reese. You're not going to talk about all 17 in the meeting, but here's three to highlight. So I love this idea of handing over some of that heavy brain work to the technology, but don't think that the technology is replacing you.
Yeah. My vision, honestly, for the way meetings are going to work is the the meeting is a place where you're going to go explore the emotional jobs with the client, right? You're going to go and just enjoy a conversation. All you have to do is show up, because in the background, guess what's been happening the whole time?
No.
Data's been being maintained, little push notifications have been being sent to the client. We've tackled jobs throughout the year periodically, so we're not having to do them all in a meeting. Meetings can now become like when you do your surge is, yes, you might have a particular value add, but most of the time you're just trying to build emotional connection with these clients, and you're not stressed out about like, what are we missing, like, are we behind on stuff, because you've got a system that you trust behind the scenes that's always identifying when a job is aging. So a job has an assignment date and a time, and if it ages, then you're going to complete it at the time it's aged. You're not going to wait for the next meeting. You're just going to get the job done,
I love
and
it.
your staff can do the job. right? And you don't have to do it all. So a savings plan, we're not going to talk about that
Mhm.
in the review meeting. We're going to talk about that when it expires and when it's time in the calendar to like accomplish that for the client. It's going to be a simple push notification task of, this is what I think we're going to do this year. Does that seem good to you? Yes or no, and comment.
I love it. Mhm.
That's kind of what we envision, but that's a world that's still, I'm painting a picture that's 12 months out from now, man.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, in 3 months, I'm going to be able to finally get a job done of some kind in the system because we'll finally have Android and web and iPhone, and it's exciting. But like this stuff, like it takes some of the software that has lasted
Mhm.
in wealth management. I don't know if people realize this, but it's not like a giant software market. This is a small market.
Very
Like it's
small.
a max 3 billion in spend market. And for that's why there's only two or three big companies. And
I,
the reason there's not a bunch of little ones is your
oh,
product has
okay,
to
yeah.
get to like a certain place before anyone can even use it. It's
Mhm.
like, do you have integrations? No. Do you have native, like you got 50 questions as a baseline, you got to dump millions into it before you're even possible to
Yep.
use.
Yeah,
So it's just a tough market.
I had read one time, this was years ago, and it was pointing out that Microsoft has a bigger beta test group than our entire industry, right? They're
Yeah,
no, it's literally
dude.
like
Yeah.
their beta test group before they
Yeah.
roll out the next version of Excel or whatever it is, that's bigger than our entire industry. So, yeah, you're
Yeah.
never gonna get an Excel or Office 365 version of financial planning. There's just not a market for it.
There's not a market for it.
No.
And so you have to have another way to monetize in order to um get the scale that you
Yeah.
need. And one of the things that we've been seeing work that's different about our platform is advisors are using this on a one to many
Mhm.
relationship, meaning like they'll host coaching uh, consults once a month, do webinars with a client on a topic, but you're not committing to do private wealth services for that end customer. They're managing money with you, they've got smaller assets, but you're coaching, you're training, they're self directing. You'll ping them once in a while and keep them going in the process. But you're not committing to do all the jobs for them, and you're not committing to be a private wealth counselor because you're building. Right now, the problem in our industry, the funnel of wealth management practices is super narrow. Like
Mhm.
we don't have a big funnel up top. In marketing, what you want to do is have a big open funnel at the top with like tons of possibilities and then slowly push people down to the bottom of the funnel. And in wealth management, the funnel at the top is teeny. It's like, you got to have this much in assets, this much in AUM, got to meet this profile. You got to be willing to do it all with me, all or nothing,
Mhm.
turn it all over. And so you don't have a very big pool. So what we're trying to do is say, hey, you can have a pretty big prospect pool. You could have a fairly significant like coaching pool. You could have a private wealth pool that's your
Mhm.
smallest segment, but you don't have to turn away people just because they're small. Why don't you just give them
Yeah,
less? Why don't you just like commit less?
sure.
Don't commit anything personal to them. They don't get a one relationship, but they get a one to many. And we're seeing that like work really well. You're seeing it work in a lot of other platforms
Mhm.
too, like Origin. There's a lot of like 401k kind of like market stuff
Yeah,
where advisors are doing one to many advice, and they're monetizing it really efficiently. It's better than their private wealth profitabilities in some cases.
I
So
love it.
I just think that that's the future, more like efficiency and less bottlenecking.
Yeah. Reese, I've loved this conversation. It's really a lot of fun. This podcast, as you know, is all about taking action. So I want to highlight a couple of quick takeaway action items that advisors can implement right away. And I got to say, the number one that I just wrote down in our conversation, and this is action item number one. I love this idea of explaining to clients, I have 17 jobs. In my mind, this is a version of the dishwasher rule. So I wrote this down on my page to say, hey, clients, one of my jobs is to do this. One of my jobs is to do this, to highlight for them that you're not just rebalancing their account once a quarter, that you're not just doing this this vague, opaque, comprehensive financial planning that nobody is actually wanting. If they ask for it, it's only because they've been told to ask for it. So that
Yeah,
would be my
yeah.
first action item takeaway is articulate to clients your 17 jobs or whatever vernacular you want to use for that.
Yeah, and if you want to learn more about that, just go get the book "Jobs to Be Done" by Anthony Olwick. Chapter 3 talks about how to write out a job map, how you would describe the job. There's a different way to describe it for yourself than the client. The client like wants to hear it in sort of a desired outcome, like what's going to feel like when the job's done. And so you could just read a little bit more about that. But even if you hack it and you just write a job and that's it, you're going to do better than describing it in general terms, because advisors most often don't break down their jobs into the concrete small things they do.
Mhm.
Like, make sure one of the jobs is I maintain an accurate net worth statement for you so that when we make decisions, we're not doing it blindly. Like, say that,
Yeah.
like that's just like that's a stupid simple job, and they do actually value it,
Yep.
because if you show them what that looks like, they'll be like, yeah, I've had trouble kind of keeping up on that myself.
Yeah.
So
Last action item I would throw out there is to go check out Elements. Reese, you guys do a webinar every month that's available to the public, and really looking at this from a lens of, all right, how am I communicating these jobs? How am I giving clients these nudges? How am I letting technology doing the heavy lifting so that I can spend more time in those stories?
yeah, yeah. I would say I would say download the go listen to the podcast that Matthew was on. Our podcast is called Elementality. You can go to our website and get it, and then it'll cue you when the webinars are happening. Those happen every month. You'll just learn a lot from that. We're really trying to just share what's worked at my RIA, and we're not perfect, and we're working really hard to build a different type of product. My team is really excited about the traction we're having. We've got over 100 firms that are using it right now, and independent RIAs. We're not in any. We're the types of firms we're working with really are the future of the industry, and it's fun to see
Wow.
big firms, small firms, solo startups, large enterprises. Like, it's working across the spectrum, and as we get more features built into the product, it's just going to be a layup. I really feel like we're building the right thing. So
That's great. Well, Reese, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for these insights. Again, articulating the jobs to clients. I'm really excited to start implementing that in my own practice. So, everybody, thank you for listening. Reese, again, thanks for your time. And until next time, happy planning.